So, let's go. Mal ein Video drüber reinziehen, was dieser High-Fructose-Cornsirup ist. Ich weiß, dass da ganz viele Sachen mit gesüßt werden, dass auch die Cola, also sehr viele Softdrinks damit gesüßt werden. Und es wird dem Zeug Schuld gegeben daran, dass die Amerikaner die fettleibigsten Leute der Welt sind.
What even is high fructose corn syrup, and why is it in everything these days? And why are so many people freaked out about it?
Fucking billig. Deswegen holen sich manche, glaube ich, in Amerika, wenn sie fancy sind, das aus Mexiko, aus Glasflaschen, weil die da Rohrzucker benutzen. Irgendwie so war das.
Well, high fructose corn syrup starts off as regular corn syrup, kind of like this. Then the corn refining industry uses enzymes derived from bacteria to convert much of the glucose here into fructose. Why? Because fructose tastes way sweeter than glucose does. Sweeteners of all kinds are expensive, and if food manufacturers use the high fructose stuff, they can make their products just as sweet for less money. Also, more sweetness for fewer calories, I suppose. It's actually kind of shocking how not sweet regular corn syrup is. I experienced this recently when I was doing a bunch of experimental brownie recipes.
Und irgendwer hatte das auch noch ausprobiert. Ich glaube, Red Nile war das. Da wollte irgendwas machen mit High-Fructose-Cornsirup, aber das kriegst du so als normaler Mensch gar nicht zu kaufen.
I made a batch where I replaced the sugar with corn syrup by weight, and I even accounted for the fact that the corn syrup is about 25% water. I upped the quantity proportionally. These came out flat and gummy, perhaps because of the extra water, and they were so undersweet as to be kind of disgusting. It was like eating a packing material. If you want to substantially replace sugar with corn syrup in your food, you kind of have to make the corn syrup sweeter. And why would you want to replace sugar with corn syrup in your food? Well, again, because it's cheaper, or at least it can be cheaper depending on where you are. You can only grow sugarcane in very wet, hot climates. Brazil is perfect for it.
Obwohl, wir haben in Deutschland ja Rübenzucker, ne? Aus der Zuckerrübe wird das bei uns gewonnen, wusste ich's. Deswegen gibt's ja auch diesen Zuckerrübensirup. Den fand ich eigentlich mal ganz geil. Ist bloß scheiße, wenn die Packung irgendwann klebrig wird.
They're the biggest sugarcane producer on Earth now. Here in the United States, it's really only possible in the deep southeast, Florida, Louisiana, Texas. Up north, you can grow sugar beet, and indeed, sugar beet accounts for about half of US sugar production. And when I said sugar that time, I meant specifically this, sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide,
Die machen das auch in der Zuckerrübe? Gut zu wissen.
two monosaccharides
Ich dachte, das ist so ein deutschlandspezifisches Ding.
bonded together, one glucose and one fructose holding hands, basically. The sugar produced here in the United States is generally about half beet, half cane, and its price is artificially inflated via a complex government system of price controls and import tariffs and production quotas. Those familiar with the intricacies of the federal government's sugar program could be forgiven for wondering whether they had been led astray by their history books. And it was actually the Soviet Union's ideology that prevailed in the Cold War. So writes the Libertarian Cato Institute in their denunciation of US sugar policy. These are policies with historical roots in the earliest years of the country, when Southern sugar barons
Sieht ja schon ein bisschen wie nach Sklaverei aus, oder worum geht's jetzt?
enslaved human beings and used the fruits of their toil to buy politicians. It is not a pretty history. In contrast, the price of corn, maize, here in the United States is kept artificially low.
Aber Mais ist auch richtig geil. So ein schöner Maiskolben mit Kräuterbutter, gedämpft oder gegrillt. Das ist so geil. Und wenn du richtig guten Mais hast, wie lecker süß der ist, und dann hast du das gegen die Kräuterbutter, die richtig schön würzig ist, noch ein bisschen Schnittlauch mit drinne. Genial. Weil ich mich vorher immer gefragt habe, Mais ist doch nicht so süß.
low. I mean, corn has always been cheap and easy to grow. It is, after all, indigenous here, right? But since the Depression in the 1930s, the federal government has also paid billions and billions of dollars in subsidies directly to farmers of corn and other grains. Corn is just so cheap and abundant here, which is why scientists for decades have worked to try to make things out of it beyond just grits and animal feed. The white, fluffy starch inside a kernel of corn is a combination of amylose and amylopectin, which are both just huge branches of glucose, thousands of glucose units all stuck together. When the glucose is all branched out like that, we cannot taste it, or at least we cannot taste it as sweet. We eat it and it goes into our system and it gets broken down into glucose and then absorbed into our body, where it is used as calories, energy, fuel. That's a good thing if you need it.
Wie viel Kalorien hat denn Mais? Wenn das im Magen alles aufgespalten wird. 86 Kilokalorien pro 100. Oh ja. Andere Gemüsesorten liefern bei gleicher Menge oft nur um die 20 Kilokalorien. Ist auch reich an Mineral- und Ballaststoffen. Er enthält unter anderem Kalium und Magnesium. Also nicht so schlecht.
Bad thing if you don't. Corn refiners use a combination of acid and enzymes to break the starch down into smaller or simpler carbs that we can taste, primarily dextrose, which is a kind of glucose. And that process has been around since the 19th century. It wasn't until the 1960s when Japanese and American industries working in collaboration figured out a new enzymatic process to convert some of the glucose into fructose. Now, the American processed food industry had a product that was as sweet as sugar, but far cheaper to make. And because it's already in solution, it's cheaper to work in a factory. You can pump it around the plant through pipes. This is why high-fructose corn syrup is nearly ubiquitous in processed foods, despite persistent and well-publicized health concerns. Are those concerns the overblown pseudoscience of hippie mom bloggers? Some of them, maybe, but there is some real science there too that we should talk about. I do wonder if the
Ist doch scheiße. Weil ich mir dachte, du könntest in Deutschland die Produktion von Lebensmitteln ja noch billiger machen, wenn du auch Mais benutzt. Maisanbau, Deutschland. Wenn man nicht ordentlich kaut, auf jeden Fall. Im Rheintal im Baden-Württemberg stehen nach Angaben des Badischen Landwirtschaftlichen Hauptverbands auf 80% der Flächen Maispflanzen. Krass.
The stigma is why, as near as I can tell, it is impossible to buy high-fructose corn syrup by itself at a grocery store. This is why I had to order a 5-gallon bucket, obviously intended for commercial operations. The 55 does not mean this weighs 55 pounds, though it does happen to weigh almost exactly 55 pounds. Very heavy. Rather, the 55 here indicates that 55% of the dry weight in this bucket is fructose. It tastes extremely sweet and silky smooth as my new sheets from the sponsor of this video, Helix Sleep. Let's thank them. I've been sleeping on our new Helix mattress for a while. It came to our door miraculously compacted in a box, and it re-aerated itself into one of the most comfortable beds I've slept on. We took their quiz, we told them how we usually sleep, and we got something that is sinky enough for me, but firm enough for Lauren. I just got some new accessories for it.
Das muss knacken, hart sein, das muss ein gepolsterter Boden sein, ansonsten mach ich mir den Rücken kaputt.
Pad that makes it cooler to the touch because it is hot AF down here. We got these crazy soft sheets and some more Helix pillows. Lauren is incredibly picky about pillows and she loves these.
I like it because it's fluffy and supportive, but still sort of flattens out because I sleep on my stomach.
You can try a Helix mattress yourself, risk-free. They give you
Das Bett sieht fucking klein aus.
a 100-night trial to make sure that you like it. Do us both a favor and use my link in the description to save up to $200 on your Helix Sleep mattress. Plus, you get 2 free pillows. That's helixsleep.com/Ragusia. Thank you, Helix. Now, high fructose corn syrup and health. The American corn refining industry has spent a huge amount of money to communicate to you and me that sugar is sugar is sugar. And if you are becoming unhealthy by eating high fructose corn syrup, that's because you're eating too much sugar, period. And you should cut back. And you know what? There's probably a lot of truth to that. But because the industry has already delivered that message to you quite effectively, I'm going to try to give you the best argument to the contrary. There is a lot of research showing that fructose is processed differently by our body than other simple carbs. And sure, fructose is natural. It literally means fruit sugar. It's found in all kinds of fruits like this tomato.
Naja, außer du hast es in... Ja, das Problem ist dann ja aber eher, dass die Frucht fehlt, ne? Wenn du die ganzen anderen Bestandteile bei der Tomate dazu isst oder beim Apfel oder so, ist ja wieder gut. Aber wenn du nur die eine Scheißsache rauspresst.
Tomato is a fruit. Good tomatoes have a lot of fructose in them. That's why they're sweet. But just because something is naturally occurring doesn't mean that it can't be bad for you. And very rarely in the fruit world do you get concentrations of fructose this intense or ratios of fructose to glucose that are so out of balance.
Ja, aber Fructose ist in Früchten und zu sagen, dass damit Früchte scheiße sind, deswegen habe ich das gesagt. Doch gut, Mann, damit du auch mal wie ein Apfel isst.
Science says glucose enhances the absorption of fructose in our guts. So when we eat glucose and fructose in roughly equal proportions, we generally are able to digest it just fine. Some popular fruits like apples naturally have way more fructose than glucose in them, but most others have roughly equal glucose to fructose ratios, as does table sugar there.
Was hat er gerade rüber
Most
geraspelt?
others have roughly equal glucose to fructose.
Ach,
Ratios, as does table sugar there. When we eat more fructose than glucose, the result is called excess free fructose in our guts, which you might have trouble digesting. Some people in particular seem to be fructose malabsorbers. Let me introduce you to somebody. This is Luann de Christopher. About 20 years ago, she found herself rushing her daughter to the hospital with blue...
Jo, mach nicht so doll, immer schützen, das Wasser trinken, nicht vergessen. Nee, die Alte, die liegt im Bett unter 3 Decken mit Hitzeunterlage und Fenster zu und Heizung an.
Lips. Awful asthma this little girl had. Really scary stuff.
You know, she had all these symptoms. We thought it might be food related. We took her to an allergist. The allergist said, eliminate corn. We did that. We had no results. When we eliminated anything with the word corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, was when we had our breakthrough. And it made no sense.
Indeed, what does sugar in your digestive system have to do with your lungs, right? And this happened just around the time when high fructose corn syrup production and consumption was peaking in the United States. It was everywhere and widely regarded as nutritionally indistinguishable from sucrose. But when Luann de Christopher's daughter stopped eating high fructose corn syrup, her lungs got better. Now, most parents would be perfectly satisfied and convinced by that purely anecdotal correlation. Not Luann.
So I returned to school, got a master's in biochemistry, molecular biology. I have collaborated with a nutritional epidemiologist.
Finde ich auch mal krass, dass es so ein Riesenproblem ist und wahrscheinlich Millionen, Abermillionen Leute betrifft, dass die Lebensqualität von diesen Leuten so hardcore einschränkt. Und dann muss sich eine scheiß Mutter da hinsetzen, selber nochmal zur Schule gehen, den scheiß Meister da machen, um die Pässe selber zu erforschen. Das ist doch einfach armselig.
Dr. Tucker at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. And with her, I've conducted numerous studies.
I want to stress, this is not work that is appearing in earthy, crunchy conspiracy theory blogs. This is appearing in peer-reviewed major scientific journals, findings that have since been reproduced by other research teams. This research shows that if you are a person who has trouble absorbing fructose, excess free fructose hangs around in your gut where it is highly reactive with other stuff in there.
It then goes on to interact with your proteins. It undergoes a reaction known as glycation. You form these immunogens. They're tiny. They are, can become absorbed or in your systemic circulation, travel throughout all your tissues, and your lungs have a high concentration of these receptors that are mediators of asthma. And what do? They promote airway mucus hypersecretion. Your airways get filled with mucus.
Hence asthma, chronic bronchitis, and potentially other allergy-type symptoms other research has indicated. Now,
Was Sachen gibt's. Wie ich mich gerade ein bisschen weird, dass ich Ananassaft getrunken habe.
hold on, some people might say. People might say, hey, what about apple juice? Apple juice is a product that naturally has an elevated fructose to glucose ratio. Apple juice isn't giving kids asthma. Thing is, it actually might be. Not in everybody, obviously. Scientists are still working on this. There may be a genetic component to fructose malabsorption. It might have to do with the microbiome in our guts, maybe things we're doing to our bodies, antibiotics, messing with the bacteria that help us to digest sugars. Nobody knows, but kids do seem to be disproportionately affected. Kids of color here in the United States seem to be disproportionately affected for reasons that are no doubt multifactorial, and this is an area of emerging research that we should all probably be paying attention to. Oh, and don't be thinking that all these hip new alternatives are automatically going to solve your problems for you, like agave syrup. Agave syrup has lots of excess free fructose in it. Now, remember, I am not a scientist. I am just a nerd who likes to eat. I have a lot of confidence in the ability of science to expose the truth over the long arc of history. But in the meantime, some very moneyed interests have a lot at stake in us all believing that sugar is sugar is sugar. I mean, just read the Wikipedia article on high-fructose-corn-syrup. You're gonna
Das ist ja wie mit Kippen, ey. Das wird ja so lange denied, wie es geht, weil es einfach fucking billig ist.
find tons of citations to studies that find that sugar is sugar in the body. I do not reject these studies. Most food science is industry funded, and not all of that science is industry funded. This is just the way it is, and maybe by and large, sugar is sugar is sugar. But there is reason to believe that at least in some people, consuming lots of fructose in excess of glucose could be a problem. And food manufacturers do not have to tell us how much excess free fructose is in their food. It is commonly believed that soft drink manufacturers use this kind of corn syrup, 55% fructose. But independent analysis from the University of Southern California finds the fructose content of drinks is often much higher than that. And even the total sugar content of the drinks is often higher than what's shown on the nutrition label.
Achso, nicht insgesamt. Ich dachte, wie kannst du mehr Zucker reinmachen, als reinpasst?
So we don't even know what we're consuming. What we can say for sure is that high fructose corn syrup, like MSG, takes really inexpensive garbage foods and it renders them freaking delicious. I should probably be eating less of them. You do you. I just dropped my spoon in there.
Das sind drin. Zumachen.
Did you get it?
Sehr gutes Video. Kein Apfelsaft für Heran.